Well, good morning. You join me here at S&R Fishery in Lincolnshire for a 24-hour session. I got down a bit before the camera crew did, got the rods in place, and it wasn't long at all before I got a fish. I've actually got a fish sat in the retainer there. I got the rod straight back out on the spot, and just as we were about to take a look at the fish I caught a short while ago, the same rod has ramped off again. And it's just a case of dropping in the right place at the right time. And at this time of year, those feeding opportunities may only be very, very brief. Emphasise the importance of getting that rod straight back out on the spot. We'll talk about all this a bit later on. Like that, does he? Get him. Oh yes. Not bad at all, that one. Look at that. Oh, look at that for a fish. Proper nice scaly line, that one. Apple slice linear. Not a bad way to start the day. I've got all three rods back in position once again. I've got two rods being fished at 7.8 feet, which was the depth I found most of the fish on the sonar. And I've got another rod fished in an area of shallow water. We've got really high air pressure at the moment, 1030 air pressure. Not great for feeding. Generally when you have periods of high air pressure, the fish do tend to feed very little. Not sure what the science is behind it, why, but it definitely is the case. Also, the fish do tend to spend more time within the layers, up in the water. So I was quite surprised actually to see that there was fish actually down in almost 8 feet of water feeding on the bottom. But I think as the day goes on, I think you will find that the fish do come up in the water more. And on this venue where zigs aren't allowed, if those fish are maybe cruising around at sort of like 3 feet, what I've done, I've got an area of shallow water to my right where it is around 3.5 feet deep. I positioned a rod there, so any fish that may be coming from open water, sat at a depth of say 3 feet for example, if they're continuing on that line, will encounter that 3 feet of water off to the right. So I've got a rod positioned there. That's the plan anyway. Hopefully it pays off, but either way, we're off to a flying start. Colours on that. Well, I think bites are going to be few and far between on this session, so to get a fish like this on the bank so early on is a right result. This one weighed just over 22 pounds. Lovely dark looking fish, proper solid chunky one. Yeah, I'm well happy with that. Absolute magic. Look at that. Proper apple slice linear, that one. A little bit smaller than I was expecting. I thought this was going to be a 25 pluser, but just under. It doesn't really matter, does it? Beautiful looking carp. And yeah, one of two fish in such quick succession. Not long after getting the rods out this morning. But I think that could be the end of this morning feeding spell. Good job I got down here early to make the most of that. But I'm going to slip this fish back, then I'll talk to you a bit more about the tactics that I'm using on this session. So this is the exact rig that I used to catch them two fish this morning. It's a very, very simple blowback rig. It's tied using 20-pound Camotex soft. I start off by stripping about 4 inches of the coating from the coated braid. I then just tie a simple overhand knot to create the hair. I then tie on a rig ring around an inch above the loop from the hair. Then attach the hook bait, which is a trimmed down pink Northern Special wafter. I do think the pink in this particular situation, I think is such a good colour. We've seen it on underwater filming. They just seem to be attracted by that vivid pink colour, more so than any other colours from what I've seen on the underwater footage anyway. I then attach the hook, which is a size 5 wide gape long shank hook, and I just pass the hook itself, the point of the hook, through the rig ring which I have tied off, so that it sits just below level with the barb to create a blowback effect. The hook is then attached with a simple knotless knot, and I've then got a flipper over the eye of the hook to help the hook turn and improve the hooking properties. Now, the hook link itself is just finished off with quite a large overhand loop on one end. This just allows me to quick change the rig. You can, of course, use quick change swivels and anti-tangle sleeves. Personally, I don't. I just find by having a large loop on the end there, it allows me to pass that through the swivel and drop the hook bait or the hook through the loop, and that for me is quick change enough. Plus the fact, because this is doubled over on the end, it kind of acts like an anti-tangle sleeve anyway. You've got twice the thickness, twice the stiffness. I do find it pushes the rig away from the lead. And to further boost the visual attraction, that wafter hook bait is topped off with around 8-9 wriggly maggots. These are attached very simply by threading the maggots onto a sewing needle before transferring that onto some 10-pound zig and floater line. The reason I'm using the line, it doesn't matter that it's zig and floater line, it can be any mono, but the reason I use this over bait floss, dental floss, is I just think the mono beds down better when you're tightening those knots. I have had it where bait floss has started to unravel. No matter how many knots I tie in the floss, it doesn't seem to like bed down on itself as tightly as a mono does. The maggots themselves are just attached to the hair simply by passing the mono through the loop and then just tying quite a few overhand granny knots, and that is it. That's the finished rig. You can see there, it's got all the added visual attraction of the lively wriggly maggots on top of what is already a bright coloured wafter anyway. But I do think that extra movement is what makes it so appealing to the carp at this time of year. Well, it's gone a bit quiet since those 2 fish first thing this morning. So just reeled in the rods and come for a walk just to see if there's signs of fish anywhere else, see if I need to be making a move. As those temperatures drop and the carp's metabolism slows down, you do find that the fish move around a lot less, and they can also be grouped up a lot tighter. But I always think of that as perhaps a positive thing in many respects, in that if you can see a fish show, if you can find one fish, then generally there should be others in the vicinity. And where I'm stood now, I've got a great viewpoint across the lake. I can see any signs of fish, and location at any time of year really is key, but in the winter it becomes even more important. Now, there's no hard and fast rules as to where the carp are going to be on any given day. Generally speaking though, if there's a cold wind blowing, you often find the fish are on the back of that wind. If it's a warmer conditions with southwesterly winds and low air pressure, warmer daytime temperatures, then often the fish will be on the end of the wind. I say often because unfortunately the carp just don't read the rule book, and it can be the case sometimes that they end up on the back of a warm wind. They are where they want to be. I think a lot of people believe that as we go into the winter, into the colder months, that the carp immediately head for the deeper water, and this isn't the case at all. And on a lot of venues at the moment, the fish seem to be in the shallower water. Maybe they're taking advantage of the sun's warming rays when it does eventually appear, and the shallower water warms up quicker. I don't know, but on a lot of venues I've visited recently, the fish do seem to be in the shallows, right in the margins, as you'd expect to see them in the spring and summer months. Other features worth looking at this time of year, anywhere where there's structure and snags, there are always going to be fish holding areas, regardless of the time of year. Same with weed beds, any areas of weed where the weed's dying off. As the weed's dying off, it's exposing lots of natural food items, meaning they have natural food, a food larder almost close to hand, so they've got an easy supply of food without having to expend too much energy searching for it. But at the end of the day, the best tool you can have for finding fish at this time of year are your eyes and a bait boat with a really good echo sounder. Now, we've talked about the rig, but we haven't talked about the lead arrangement and what's going on above it. Here I've got quite a hefty 5-ounce inline lead, and this is set to fish drop-off style. I've got one of the inline drop-off kits there. It's a little plug that sits in the bottom of the lead there, and an insert which sits in the top. So as you saw there, should that lead get caught up on a snag, it'll just drop off, meaning we're free to play the fish. Now above this, I have got 2 foot of the tungsten rig tubing, the anti-tangle tubing. I wouldn't normally use this, but fishery rules state that you have to. It does keep everything pinned down on the deck. Above that, I've got a fly-in back lead, a slide-in back lead, again just to keep the main line pinned down above the tubing. Really simple setup. You may ask, why am I using an inline lead over a lead clip or a helicopter arrangement? Reason for that is, after watching the underwater footage, there's quite a few times when the fish would tighten up to the lead, and you can actually see the lead pivoting, moving, and it's not until the lead is off the lake bed that the fish actually feels the full weight, the full resistance. There's just more to pivot on a lead clip arrangement, whereas an inline lead, it's much more direct. There's no swivels, nothing that can pivot. When the fish tightens up to the lead, it feels the full force, so it really does aid the hooking properties of the overall rig. Not happy with this right-hander. I'm going to redo that. I'm going to send the boat out, see if I can find anything nice and exciting. Been a few fish showing to the right as well. Not in any one area though, kind of all over the place. But I feel like at the moment I'm missing an opportunity off to the right here. So I'm just going to reposition that rod. Hopefully we can find something of interest, or even better, find a few fish. There's a fish, there's a fish. There we go. So I've just dropped my right-hand rod. I've been fishing it off to the right of the swim in some shallow water. Seen a few fish showing there today, but nothing like what I'd seen out more in open water. Plus I think going into tonight, I think the deeper water is going to be more productive. I think my best chance of catching on that shallow water will have been during the day. So just drop that in 7 foot, or just over 7 feet of water. It's at the base of a shelf, and as I was sort of moving the boat around in position, I did see a fish show on the echo sounder as well, which is always encouraging. And that's it, trap is set. Obviously, if I didn't have the boat, I would be casting around, leading around, or just casting bags to show in fish. But I can get these rods in position much more stealthily than casting leads and mesh bags. But obviously where bait boats are banned, that's going to be your next best option in this sort of situation. Well, I've got that rod all reset for the night ahead. I'm happy with the other two, they don't need moving at all. Just tied couple of pieces of marker elastic on the line there, a foot above the reel. You might be wondering why I'm using 2 pieces of marker elastic instead of 1. It's just that way I can see if one has moved. The GPS on the boat is super accurate anyway, but this is just for my own personal peace of mind. I know it's going to be absolutely smack bang on the money if I need to reposition it after I catch a fish in the night and it's going back out onto that same spot. I'm not spreading maggot all over the swim. I'm still fishing it on a really tight area. Well, I just dropped the right hand rod, which was only probably less than a rod length from where the middle rod is, and the middle rod's away. So it shows they're not bothered about the disturbance of the bait boat. I mean, it is quite a pretty quiet, stealthy boat anyway. And also, when I am sending it out in the swim, I'm not zooming it around like a speedboat. I am sort of moving it quite slowly, especially as I approach the baited area. I think a lot of people do seem to be in a rush, obviously getting towards the spot. You want to get it there quickly, but when you're fine tuning it and getting it in position, I think you want to be doing it as stealthily as possible. This is just the sort of time of day you'd expect to bite, really. First light, last knock-ins, prime bite time. Get it. Yes. Yes! Third fish. Another lovely scaly fish as well. Well, he's definitely not the biggest, but he's certainly the smallest fish that I've caught this session. And it's also the scaliest one. It's a lovely looking fish. He's got a bit of a kinky tail going on there. Don't know what all that's about. Looks like a bottle opener. But yeah, he's a cool looking carp all the same. And that gives me my hat trick, which I'm really, really pleased about, because at the start of this session, if I thought I could have landed 3 fish, given the conditions we're faced with today, I'd have taken that all day long. Proper pleased with that. Burn. Well, I was just about to climb in my sleeping bag for the night, and I'm about to land the 4th fish of the session. That did virtually nothing. It came all the way in. I thought it was a really, really small fish at first. It did all its fighting under the tip. And there we go, we've got another beautiful looking scaly. Not a big one, but that looks amazing. Let's have a look at him. Look at the scales on that. Every one of these fish has been an absolute stunner, but I think that one tops them all. Absolutely beautiful looking fish, and that makes it number 4. I certainly didn't expect to be having a session like this, and I do think there's chance of more to come. Well, I think I jinxed myself last night. I did say I think there might be another chance of a fish, and nothing's happened since then. Had a couple of liners through the night. I woke up this morning and I've not seen any fish show at all. It's a bit of a lifeless, nothing sort of day. It's grey, miserable. There isn't even any birds tweeting or anything. It's like nature hasn't woken up today. It seems lifeless all round. And yeah, I think it's going to be hard to get another fish before our time here is up. What I am going to do though, is something I do most mornings when I wake up, just looking at the lines in the water there is a build-up of sediment there on the line. Like I said, it's just suspended sediment, but what I do in these situations, I just slacken all the line off. I will just leave that just for a couple of minutes. It just allows that line just to re-sink and settle, and as that line is sinking, you do find a lot of that sediment will come off the line. If it hasn't, literally just give it a few little pulls, a few little tweaks. Obviously don't move the lead or the rig. Just a couple of little pulls on the line like that, and you'll see all that sediment just coming off the line. A number of times I've done this where I've just slackened everything off, and a number of times I've done this where the bobbin, I've just heard it crack against the blank. Just within a minute of doing this, I've had a bite really quickly. But yeah, something I do every morning when I wake up. Well, we've got 2 hours of the session remaining. I've not seen fish show anywhere else though, which is perhaps a good thing. But yeah, there's still a chance. I'm going to stick it out right to the death. Hopefully I can end this film with a big fat carp in my hands. I think the chances are quite slim, but we'll see what happens. Now I know a lot of anglers take a variety of different baits with them on a session, but for me, all I brought along with me were a couple of pots of different hook baits, some wafters and some pop-ups, and the only loose feed I even bothered to bring with me were the maggots I've got now. Now when it comes to maggots, I want maggots that are big, juicy, and importantly, fresh and clean, which is pretty much the opposite of what I've got with me here. But they're not great. They are small, old, they're in sawdust which hasn't been changed. They don't smell great, but it was all that could be rustled up at really short notice to do with this session. But they've worked. They've caught 4 fish. But yeah, you can see there that the quality isn't good. There's some skins in there. They don't smell great. They're not the biggest maggots as well. The colour wise, I've not really found it makes any difference. I have often in the past, I've favoured white maggots with just a few reds mixed in. I've used mixed maggots and fluoros and reds, and to be totally honest, I've not found it actually makes that much difference. I know some people swear by one particular colour, but yeah, I don't think it really matters. I think it's just a fact. They are quite visual on the lake bed anyway, and I think the movement adds a lot more attraction on another level. And with it being a natural bait, I think it often triggers that instinctive feeding response that conventional baits can't often achieve. However, there are certain venues where it just isn't possible. Venues that are absolutely stuffed full of smaller nuisance species. It can be difficult to fish with maggots no matter how big a hook bait you decide to use and how many maggots you want to feed. I think the species that I found particularly problematic are perch. No matter how cold it gets, their feeding activity doesn't really slow down that much. With roach and bream that feed particularly aggressively in the summer, as the temperatures start to drop, their feeding activity does reduce somewhat. However, perch just seem to carry on regardless, especially venues that have got sort of decent sized perch. They've got big mouths, they can eat a lot of maggot, and they can also fit a big hook bait in their mouth as well. So those have been the species I've found to be particularly problematic, more so than roach and bream, etc. So it isn't possible to fish with them on all venues. However, I have found that even on waters that are stuffed full of roach and bream, where it would be completely impossible to fish with maggots in the summer, once those temperatures start to drop, once we've had a few frosts and their feeding activity declines, then it is actually possible to fish with maggots. Well, that's it. My time here is up. Nothing else has happened. I've not seen any signs of life in front of me at all this morning. But to go away, having put 4 fish on the bank, I'll take that all day long. This is always going to be a bit of a tricky session, so I think that's not a bad result. But it just goes to show, by choosing the right venue and the right tactics, you can still put fish on the bank even when conditions aren't that favourable. So hopefully you've picked up a few tips from this little video so you can get out this winter and hopefully put some fish on the bank yourself. Good luck.